Hello, hi everyone. Thanks to those that have joined the session today. My name is Darren Scher. I'm the Group Product Engineering Director at Reach, so look after the product and engineering teams. And we've brought a selection of employees here today who work in product and engineering and data to sort of take you through how they got here and sort of what got them into the industry and sort of where those passions spark from. The reason we're doing this today is we've got a lot of vacancies at the moment in product and engineering. And also we have such a diverse range of people in the team that have really interesting stories of how they got into the industry that we thought we sort of have to share with others, especially those that haven't really necessarily thought about getting into the industry. This is just to show that anything's possible. It's never too late to make a change in your career or to even consider product and engineering. So I thought I'd start off actually, if each of the different panel members can introduce themselves, tell us your name, and then also sort of take us on the journey of how you got here, how you got into the industry, and how that sort of passion ignited. So I'll start with Diana.
Hello, my name is Diana. A bit about me. So I'm from Brasov, Romania. That is practically in Transylvania. Probably you heard about Dracula. That's where it comes from. So what about me? All my studying was oriented around natural sciences and mathematics. So I thought naturally I will follow computer science in uni. Okay, good. So I started doing that, but I found it very boring. And in year 2, I decided, okay, this is definitely not something I will want to do for a living. Maybe it's gonna stay as a hobby. So I just dropped out. Afterwards, I thought I'll do something very different. So I started studying preschool pedagogy. I finished that, and while I was writing my final paper for preschool pedagogy, I got a news that was saying that the new draft for CSS3 and HTML5 went out, and it was so interesting, and it was so different than everything that the web was about up until that point, and I was absolutely convinced that that's exactly what the web needed to be big from that moment on, to really be something important and to actually be, I don't know, a more interesting domain to be part of. And well, then I finished uni, and not very long after, life took me in London, and I needed a job. And I didn't really know what to do. I didn't have much experience. I was almost freshly out of uni. So I thought, okay, I could be a dog walker, or I could try to do web development, because, well, it's been a bit of a hobby. The thing is that I got an offer as a front-end developer first. So that's how it started. And then pretty much I stayed up to date with whatever was interesting or new, always followed whatever I thought I like to do more and try to mix that with what's the demand on the market. And that's how I got here. Now I'm a technical lead as part of the data team at Reach. That's all.
Thanks, Diana. It's a great story and amazing you could have ended up being a dog walker or in web development. So it's quite a career shift. Thanks for that. So Jack, take us through sort of how you got here.
Sure.
And explain what you do as well before that, just so a sense of context.
Yeah, my name's Jack Kenley. I'm a full stack software engineer. I've been at Reach for just over 2 years now. Originally, I'm from Northampton, but I live in London. So I left school at 16 with a few GCSEs, and I worked at Tesco's for about 6 to 7 months, and then ended up joining the army. I was in the army for 5.5 years, and my sort of trade was rearming and refueling Apache helicopters. But we also did, I mean, you have a few roles. I was also a driver. I also did logistics. And I was also a fitness instructor as well. So I used to take the fitness classes for the soldiers for about 1.5 years. So quite a mixture in the army. And I did 2 tours. I did Afghanistan for a few months when I was 19 and Libya when I was 21. I left the army when I was 22 and became a lorry driver. I used to drive 22-ton lorries around the Midlands, doing multiple drops per day, which was actually really interesting because obviously being in the army my entire working career, I wasn't sure how businesses worked. So it was quite interesting to visit all the different places and see what they did. But 6 months later, I got a call from a friend who offered me a job in Afghanistan. It was on a military base in Kabul airfield, in the capital city. And basically I was ground handling ISAF and NATO aircraft. So kind of similar to what I did in the army, but I wasn't enlisted. But it was very much a military base. It was probably about 70, 80% were soldiers. And, you know, we got rocket attacks maybe every 3 to 6 months. So whilst I was out there, I started off as a ground handler. So whenever you see the guys with like the orange sticks waving at planes, that was us. And I got promoted twice and sort of became the team leader of the team out there. Whilst I was out there, I got a bit interested in the stock market. And the broker I was using, they had a website where you could sort of have a flow chart and say, if the stock rises above X, buy, you know, and if it goes down below whatever, then sell. And you could sort of add more logic to it, more complex ideas, and then back test it over previous history, which I just played around with. But eventually I sort of had more complex ideas, and the broker offered another platform called MetaTrader 4, and it had its own like programming language called MQL4. And so I wanted to see if I could sort of do these ideas. So the internet was really bad out there, but I used to drive to the middle of the airfield, and on a 3.5G connection on my phone, I'll download playlists of MQL4 tutorials, and in the evening I'd go back and study. And then as my programming got better, my ideas got better. And yeah, my code went from like 10 lines to a couple of hundred lines. But that was just an interest. And then when I got back after about 2.5 years out there, I came back and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. I was back in England and I wasn't sure whether I was going to go back into lorry driving or working in an airport as a ground handler. I mean, I didn't live near an airport, so that didn't help. But I definitely really enjoyed programming because it was like the first thing that I did that was really mentally challenging. So it took me a while, but after a couple of months, I managed to get my foot in the door as a WordPress developer, working for an agency in Milton Keynes. And yeah, I sort of went on from there, really. I ended up working for them and also a FTSE 100 company, a startup. I've also been in a DV cleared role, which is like very high security, and a Canadian company as well. And yeah, here I am.
Thanks, Jack. It's a fascinating story, and it's not uncommon to hear people get into the industry out of something passion or some need that sort of drove them to write something. I mean, would you say, in your experience, what happens when you leave the military in terms of, is there any support in terms of looking for career opportunities?
There is support. I mean, I left 10 years ago, but when I left, they have something called resettlement, and I don't know if this has changed, but they gave you a small grant depending on how long you've served. But I mean, I think from what I remember, the selection of things you could do were quite, I don't know really, like it would be aimed, say, towards lorry driving or something like that, at least the part that I was in. I didn't know technology roles existed, else I definitely would have done a boot camp or something had I known.
Thanks for that. So if anyone watching is ex-military or knows anyone that is, do consider the product and engineering industry. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate that. So I'm going to move over to Ben. If you could just obviously say your name, which I've partly said already, and what you do today at Reach and how you got here.
Sure, no problem. My name is Ben Ade. I'm the product and engineering PMO manager. So I direct the PMO team. The PMO team is primarily responsible for helping support our delivery, put governance in place that helps us better produce products and make sure that we're producing the right products as well. So working very closely with the rest of the panel members and with Darren. My career path is quite interesting from the fact that it was already decided for me from pretty much birth. Anyone with an Asian or African descent and family heritage will understand that mum and dad have probably already made the decision about what your career is going to be. And it's one of three options. Number one is a doctor. Number two, a lawyer, or number 3, a disgrace to the whole family. So I went into my studies by trying to choose subjects and career paths that kind of navigated around those professions and gave me an opportunity to delve into them if I wanted to, but I absolutely didn't want to. I didn't see myself as being in an operating theatre or a court. So I was kind of lying to my family, to my parents, by taking on business studies at A level. And it led me to study in the Midlands, where I studied at Derby University. I majored in economics. And during my time there, obviously I was very focused on my studies, my newfound freedom in the Midlands. I was actually a doorman. I was actually a head doorman at a number of clubs and bars. And I enjoyed myself a lot. I'm not saying that couldn't say that I focused as much as I should have probably on my studies, but I recognized that my personality came out. I was a very personal person, very outgoing. Anything that we were doing in terms of going out or organizing events, I was right there and I was coordinating it. And I kind of listed a little bit after university, and I had a number of roles. I worked in a factory. I worked in a call center, actually for Eon, in a call center, managing calls with customers and helping them through payment plans. And it was there that I was asked to work on a project, a customer service project. And that customer service project was looking at customer letters and phone call scripts and emails, and how we would contact the customers and let them know that they owed money to the organization or any part of the process that they needed to be at. So I was on this pilot project, and I led the team there to build these scripts and to put these communications in place. And it's the first experience and exposure I had to project work itself. But I liked it. I liked being able to work collaboratively, figure out what needed to be done and the steps that needed to be done. And then I discovered that there's a whole discipline around project management. And that excited me. It's the first time that I was passionate about anything in my life. So I looked immediately for the next project management job I could find. I quickly realized that I hadn't had a year out of university enough experience to be a senior project manager of a multinational company. So I actually looked for more suitable positions, and I actually worked for Derby City Council on a workstation project, which was getting people from deprived backgrounds into work in the newly built Westfield Centre. They really didn't give us much of a remit. It was pretty much a 4-man team, and it was just figure it out. So we rented premises, we built databases. We actually had to coach ourselves about how to coach others in terms of building their CVs. And we had to negotiate with the vendors within the centre and try and secure positions for the roles. It was actually a massive success. We got 30 people into the Westfield Centre with jobs who had previously been out of work for considerable amount of time for most. Others who just hadn't considered the roles in retail. And that success led us to getting our pictures in the paper. We met with the mayor, and we were the toast of the town. And that's when I really got a flavour for project work. So when I moved back to London, again, I followed up looking at any advert that had project in it. And I actually ended up working for TfL on the Tottenham Court Road station upgrade. And I was the assistant to the senior project manager on that in that project. In those offices, there were 27 other project managers. So it was a great experience for me, and an opportunity to see just the variety of kind of work that you do in the project space. And that included, work around products as well, which is what I'm doing now for Reach. And really just the flavor and the opportunity to work with different people. And because you're working in different industries, I've worked in healthcare, I've worked for large organizations, I've worked for large publications, Vogue, Vanity Fair, GQ, and now the brands with Reach. You just get an opportunity to see so much. And I can say, hand on heart, working with Reach, it's been fantastic. I've had the opportunity to work with some people with some amazing domain knowledge. The passion of the team is there. And obviously the technologies and the innovation within our space as well it's very strong, and it's why we're one of the number one publishers in the UK. That's the end of my advertising spiel, but no, it's been a great experience for me. I'm relatively new to the organization. I've only been here for 6 months, but having such a storied and different kind of approach and path towards coming here and leading the teams here, it's great to be able to compare the different companies that I've worked for, and I'm really thankful to be here, and I would definitely recommend this as an organization for you to come and work for.
Thanks, Ben. Fascinating. The Westfield been, bit of feedback.
Yeah.
The Westfield work must have been really rewarding, but how did you break the news to your parents that you weren't a doctor or a lawyer?
Well, my brother kind of saved the day. He went to go and study law, so he's their knight in shining armor. I'm still a disgrace to the family.
Well, if you need me to call your mum, Ben, to give a glowing review, do let me know. But they should be very proud.
I'll take you up on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Right, so moving to Victoria, same for you. If you can, give your name, explain what you do at the moment, and what journey brought you here.
Thanks, Darren. Hi, I'm Victoria Dalrymple. I'm the head of product for editorial services and platforms here at Reach. I essentially serve editorial customers and teams within the business to sort of provide the tooling that people need to do their job, and ultimately to provide a platform underneath it to serve all of the publications and the content we produce. And I guess my journey's a little different. Just some of the stories I sort of went through university, and I did a degree in sort of media, cultural studies, psychology. So I've always had a sort of interest in media and leaned that way. But once I finished, I decided I wanted a career in music. And I spent the next couple of years after that sort of working in London across a variety of pubs, clubs, bars, doing all sorts of work, such as like guest lists, helping promote club nights, DJing, anything that would try and sort of help me get a foot in the doorway. And then I eventually did get a job at a small record label, working across a number of different things. So being a bit of a jack of all trades, essentially doing a bit of A&R, a bit of press, sort of more operational, and eventually digital. This was back in sort of 2006, 2007, when streaming services and downloads were really sort of moving into the sort of the prominent place away from sort of physical. And I took that opportunity to move to a music startup and to sort of take a job as a content manager, essentially. So working across content and some of the operational side, but sort of after spending some time there, I sort of moved into account management, which featured a lot of project management essentially, and worked with third-party clients such as HMV or Samsung, and sort of worked with them to build sort of unique music streaming services. And sort of in that journey, working with lots of different stakeholders, lots of different people, focusing on lots of different customer problems, I guess, I started to identify things that I liked. And I was like, oh, I really like problem solving. I really trying to make things sort of easy for the users. And it was a sort of natural sort of transition for me over into a product role in that company. And that's really where I sort of got my first sort of foray into product, if you like. And sort of whilst working there across sort of music and technology platforms, I decided I wanted to try something different, and moved over into FX, so currency transfer, trading, essentially. So a completely different domain, completely different set of stakeholders, and just new problems to solve. And I think there I got my sort of real opportunity to sort of work on really greenfield products, if you like, and so building things from the ground up. So I got a real flavour of sort of building things and sort of getting a taste for working on things at scale. And I think I sort of also worked a lot on B2B solutions there. So I did start to miss my sort of closeness to the customer. And that was one of the appealing things about Reach. Reach obviously have a huge sort of customer base and lots of data. And I sort of moved over to work on sort of editorial tooling initially at Reach, and started to work very closely with journalists. So I had a real opportunity to sort of problem solve and have people sort of sitting next to me where I could sort of watch how they work and understand where I could improve workflows. And I think, yeah, that was a real sort of interesting problem space for me to come and work at Reach. And that's where it kind of led me in today. And so I just sort of work across broader things now, more focus on platforms essentially. But yeah, that's me at Reach and my journey.
Yeah, and it shows you going from a passion in music to winding up sort of running product teams. It's quite a shift. Similar story for me. I had a passion for film and ended up in this industry. Given the varied sort of companies you've worked for, do you find any real differences working for a publisher, whether it's the pace of things or do you feel in terms of when it comes to product management, it's all very much the same?
I mean, I think honestly, it's the same skill set is there that's needed. I think it's what's different here is it's on a much bigger scale. So my background previously was more around startups and sort of 100 to sort of 300 people in a company. And here we have, I think maybe around 5,000 people in total across all the publications. So I think coming in initially, just trying to sort of navigate that and figure out how to work with people was a big change. And I think I've had a lot of exposure to different stakeholders and different workflows that I wouldn't have had at a smaller company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, product management out of all the roles is kind of one of the newest in a way, certainly in the UK. I think it was around 2000, 2006, 2007 that it sort of really started growing popularity. So a lot of experienced product managers, generally in the UK, sort of landed in it by accident and sort of found themselves there. So, and sorry to put you on the spot, Victoria, but what would you say makes sort of good qualities for a product manager? What would you say are the kind of qualities you would look for?
I think personally, I look for curiosity in a product manager. So somebody who's open, curious to learn and try new things. I think that's really important. I think just essentially sort of having the right attitude is really vital, and sort of I think soft skills as well. So sort of figuring out how to sort of influence people and sort of communicate and work with those different people and handle the communication in different ways. I think those are kind of really sort of core skills that I would look for versus some of the perhaps more analytical skills that you can train.
Great, thanks for that. I'll give you a break now, Victoria. Thank you very much for that. So would you, I'll start again, I suppose, from Dana, and we'll kind of work around the virtual room. But Dana, what piece of advice would you give anyone who's possibly interested in getting into your line of work? If you have an answer for it.
Yeah, I was thinking practically, especially in this line, nowadays technology changes so often. Everything that we do changes all the time. So practically, if you actually want to succeed, I'd say don't get attached to a technology or of a niche application. I mean, it's such a dynamic space and skills on demand vary so often. You practically want to keep an eye out there and check what's required and be curious, be ready to learn. Attitude is a lot more important than what you actually know, because in my everyday work, almost every day, I don't know what I'm dealing with. I don't know what I'm working with. And I rely on Google. It's like I have to improve my Googling skills every day in order to figure out how do we solve this next problem? What's the best technology for it? So that's pretty much what I'm saying. And then On another hand, once you do get to be in the role, if you want to be successful, I'd say always do what you like, because there are 100 different ways to solve any engineering challenge, and pick a path that you'll be proud. Because as long as you have that attitude, you will inspire people around you, and they'll probably want to follow you, or they'll want to, I don't know, somehow they'll want to be better themselves as well. And that in itself makes you better too. I'm not sure how much this makes sense, but pretty much that's my answer.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and it's not the first time I've heard that a good engineer is a great Googler as well. So it's good to hear that spreads through to data engineering as well. Jack, what about yourself? What would you say? What bit of advice would you give to anyone who's interested or considering going into this industry?
Definitely take note of what Diana said. Passion for me as well is definitely one of them. But I mean, you've got to find the passion in the first place. So give it a go, give it a try, and see if you enjoy it. I think for me, the thing that got me sort of hooked was, or at least interested enough to do a career in it, is I really liked solving problems on a computer, or just even solving problems outside. So I think when you're learning to code, as well as learning the foundations and the basics, in my opinion, I think it can help to have a personal project, or something, a script that you're working on. A lot of developers have personal side projects, and in most interviews I've been asked about them. And for me, I think it's definitely a game changer, because it shows that you're genuinely interested in it, and you're interested in solving problems. A terrible example I've got is last year I wanted to keep a to-do list, but I wanted to write it and not have my phone, because I wanted spend less time on my phone. And after a few days, I got fed up of handwriting my to-do list. So I made some code that made a to-do list, and then emailed it to my printer at 8 o'clock every day. So I'd walk in the room and then my to-do list was waiting for me. But it just shows that when you come across a problem and you need to solve it, you then learn some code to solve it, if that makes sense. Yeah, those kinds of things. But you could also, if you wanted to get into web development, make someone a website, and just get a feel of how it's going to be, really.
Yeah, make sure you turn off the to-do list printer when you're on holiday, otherwise
Yeah.
it's not very green. But I think it's a common thing, I'd say, certainly product engineering, project management, problem solving. It's like one of the key things. And if you love problem solving, if you've got a real knack in it, I think it's the perfect industry.
Definitely.
And your point as well around passion, I think, and hobbies and doing things on the side. I mean, that's only a question I ask in interviews. What sort of side projects have you got? What have you built? Because it really shows entrepreneurial spirit and real passion for it. So it's an interesting career, because you do it full time during the day, but you're so passionate about it, you do stuff in your spare time as well. So Ben, obviously you're in sort of the PMO project management side of things. What bit of advice would you give to anyone looking to get into the stuff that you do every day?
Yeah, I should probably explain a little bit more about what PMO does. I know I did at the start, but the other two panelists actually knocked that question out of the park, so I'm going to steal a little bit from them. So first of all, PMO within our space is about, like I said, facilitating. My background is in transformation and delivery. So there are both elements as part of our PMO. We try and put the groundwork in place and the tracks in place that the team can move swiftly through what they need to do to deliver the products. And we're also a source of information for them, and we help organize the work as well. From a delivery standpoint, that takes a lot of organization. And if you're naturally inclined to organizing, if you're naturally inclined to having a good method for building your planning or thinking about how you're going to deliver a piece of the work, then this is the kind of role that you'd be very successful in. It's very strange. I've been doing this a long time, and PMO resources and teams that I've worked with, they all come from varied backgrounds. Some of them were project managers, others were in product. So it's very interesting. You can have people who just have an inclination for how best to service their teams and service each other, and they'll do very well within the role. Teamwork is a big part of it, being able to collaborate on ideas, thinking about process redesign, to be present your ideas as well. Some people believe that, sorry, lost the feed for a second there. Some people believe that project delivery, project management, and PMO, these are kind of like outward-facing roles all the time. They often are, but a lot of work is done either by yourself or by your immediate team. Some of the people think that you have to be an extrovert to do this. I've seen some of the best project managers, some of the best program managers and PMO managers who basically hated the idea of getting in front of a camera or in front of a team and standing up and presenting their projects or their process redesigns, because they had the understanding of how to do that and they did good documentation. They can sometimes just share that with the team in different manners and different ways. And obviously, as I mentioned, there's a lot of different types of project that some are high profile and might require you to have engagement with senior stakeholders, as high as your CEO or your shareholders. Other projects, they can be very discreet and just as valuable. So for me, it's just about making sure, like the guys have always said, that you're passionate about what you want to do and you're willing to explore. I've been in the industry for about 17 years and I'm still learning a lot of stuff. As Diana said earlier, the industry changes so much. We're in the product and technical space now, and that's typically got a maximum of 2-year life cycle. Everything we do becomes pretty much obsolete after only a few years. So you're always trying to learn something new and see if there's innovation that you can bring into your projects and into your delivery. So yeah, that passion is definitely key, and wanting to learn more and more, and obviously networking as well, trying to find peers and examples of good, and trying to bring that into what you deliver with your teams.
Thanks, and there's definitely a common theme with passion. I mean, I think with any career you're looking to get into, being passionate about what you do is the most important thing. I think there's a saying of if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, and I think that's a very true thing.
Absolutely.
Ben, you might need to mute feedback, I think. Cheers, thanks a lot. Victoria, anything left for you to add on what advice you would give to anyone looking to get into product?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just advise people to kind of get involved as much as they could. So there's a lot of product meetups that happen. So being able to sort of attend those virtually or hopefully in person soon, they can be a great way of meeting other product managers. So meeting other people to talk about and learn things from. I always found that really, really helpful, particularly in the early stages. And then obviously where there's sort of talks or discussions where you can join. When I sort of first started going to those events, it was just absolutely mind-blowing. There was just so much that you could kind of take away and then sort of try and apply to your situation. So I think that's really good. I think there's lots of opportunities where you meet people. You can also find mentors, product mentors. So that's a good way of sort of maybe just sort of having a sort of monthly catch up with someone where you kind of talk about issues that you're facing and seeing if they can sort of provide advice or guidance. That's always been really helpful for me as well. And I think just sort of not being afraid to kind of get your hands dirty and just sort of try and keep trying new things. I feel like I'm always sort of trying something. It's like, okay, if that doesn't work, let's try something else. Let's try a different way and see if we can make it better.
Great, thanks a lot. Well, even though I've run out of questions, fortunately, we have had some pre-submitted ones. And also just to remind anyone that's watching, you can pop any questions you have in the live chat on the YouTube stream. So do feel free to put forward any questions. But in the meantime, I have a few to go on. And I think this question's a really interesting one, and I'm glad somebody has asked it, because it's affected us all. And I think particularly in product and engineering, it's generally a very collaborative way of working. And the only time it's less collaborative is if an engineer is wearing their headphones, not to disturb them. But remote working and the whole COVID situation has sort of really changed our ways of working. And I wanted to hear from each of you how you have adapted your ways of working in the current environment. And I'll sort of switch the order a bit just to keep things interesting. So Jack, how's it all changed for you, and how's it working, and how do you find it? Do you like it? Do you not?
So yeah, it's obviously changed a lot. I do actually miss going to the office. I'm not a fan of remote working. Maybe one day a week to wait for an Amazon package is all I need, really. In terms of collaboration, every morning we have a stand up and a video call to basically talk about what we're doing. So we do that, and we keep in touch on Slack a lot more to try and keep in touch and have knowing what's going on. But I do think, in my opinion, sometimes it's much easier when you're sat next to people. Sometimes you don't mean to be in a conversation or something like that, and you hear something that's going on, or someone's got a problem and you can step in and help, or vice versa. Yeah, so that's how I found remote working, really. But I'm looking forward to going back.
Yeah, so it's worth noting for those who are watching, the majority of the product and engineering will have a hybrid way of working. So, I mean, Jack, sort of based on what you said, is a balance good, or is it full-time office working you want, or do you like the idea of hybrid working?
I mean, I think it depends on people's backgrounds. I live by myself in the centre of London in a small flat. So for me, I want, that's why I lived in London. I wanted to go out and about. I obviously am happy with 3 days a week as well. But I think I'll be going back to remote when I do go back. But it depends. A lot of people would prefer fully remote, and I think it's a personal choice.
Yeah, completely. Thanks, Jack. And I'm sure we'll hear from the rest. So, Victoria, how have you found remote working, and what have been, I suppose, the advantages and disadvantages for you?
Yeah, sure. So the advantages for me are, obviously I don't live in London itself. I live outside, so I don't spend 2 hours a day commuting now, which is obviously brilliant. So you kind of get that extra time back. And I think as a parent, it's enabled me to sort of manage my sort of work-life balance a bit better. So I can now do the school drop-off and things like that, which I had to arrange for someone to do before. So on that side, it's been extremely positive. I think it's always challenging to work completely remotely. What I will say is that pre sort of COVID lockdown, a few of my team members were sort of remote anyway, or working in other countries. So we'd always been used to sort of doing our stand-ups and things just virtually anyway, and a lot of our planning meetings, things like that. So for us then, when it was just a single team, that wasn't much different to how it had always been. So there was no real change. Obviously, as the teams grow and you sort of work with more teams, it's always challenging to find sort of new ways of sort of managing that and keeping in touch. And I suppose I find I'm kind of back to back most days, where some things could just be a 5-minute conversation, tapping someone on the shoulder. It's now like a 15-minute scheduled call, just so that you can kind of get that in. I think the biggest challenge is probably around workshops in products. You kind of you find different online tools where you can sort of collaborate together effectively. But I suppose sort of doing those things in person, with a whiteboard and sticky notes, has sort of historically probably been a bit more fun.
And on that topic, in terms of workshops, any tools that it's quite, sorry, I have to comment, Ben obviously dropped off, and this is the perfect example of the negatives of remote working. But don't worry, Ben, we're saving the question for you. But Victoria, just to sort of finish on that, and thanks for that. Are there any, in terms of workshopping, Are there any tools that you use or recommend that sort of make that collaborative working easier that you've discovered during this time?
So I found Miro, which is like a sort of online sort of sticky note kind of tool, has been quite positive for collaborating. That's probably been my sort of best recommendation.
Great, thanks. So Ben, you're back just in time. We're talking about remote working, which clearly you're having joys with at the moment. How have you found it? I mean, for you, it's been quite interesting because you've actually joined the company working from home from the start, so you kind of had to get to know the team through a screen. But how have you found it, and what do you feel the advantages and disadvantages are and have been for you?
Sure. Well, let's start with the disadvantages. Obviously, you're a slave to technology, and you know, it doesn't matter how many times you test your presentations or your setup or your hookup, your internet may be down. Obviously, what this current situation has meant is that people have to better appreciate the circumstance that we're under, and it's become a lot more personable. You know, I think at Reach there's an appreciation that people do their jobs, they're professionals, but they're also people. So you know, we'll often have a meeting late in the afternoon when people have picked up their kids, and people will, you know, be bouncing toddler on their laps, and no one batters an eyelid. Where if you know, a couple of years ago, or if you had the idea to bring the kids into the office for that kind of meeting, then people may have had a bit more of a surprised look on their face. So I think there's a lot of challenges in terms of the tools and technologies that we use, but I think that access into each other's houses ultimately has meant that we get along and we get more insight into who people are as a person. Obviously, you know, the type of work that I do, Victoria does, it requires us to be able to speak to people and collaborate, as I think was mentioned previously. A lot of my work was done at the water cooler, you know, catching someone in a conversation and suggesting an idea, or them pulling me into a discussion. So we need to make sure that we leverage opportunities for that. And it might seem a bit designed and forced, but we do things like, you know, lunch and learn sessions or coffee catch-ups between teams, and we just chew the fat and just have you know, the kind of conversations you would have in a person-to-person setting, and we try and make as much opportunities for the team to get to know each other and see each other informally, as well as trying to make sure that we make best use of people's time, and we have meetings with purpose. So there is a little bit of the kind of like natural interaction that we're trying to do over a very physical connection, a very virtual connection, but you know, there's also the positives. There's also the tooling that Victoria mentioned. There's so many options now for us to better connect and sometimes find more efficient ways of working. I've worked with teams that you know, have been remote for some time, most oftentimes in other countries. And when I first started doing that, it was very challenging trying to figure out what tools you could collaborate with across different networks or across different country lines. Whereas now it's the standard for any good collaboration tool to be able to work on any device, any PC at any time. So it's been an interesting time. Obviously, it's much better to see people in person, and we look forward to the opportunity to be able to do that. And we have had some opportunities to do that as well, cautiously and following the guidelines. But I think we've put in place the tools that have allowed us to be able to be very collaborative and to do good work as well.
Thanks, Ben. I think it was a really good point I hadn't really thought about, is you getting an insight into people's homes. You actually get to know the individual more, and it's to some extent a bit more on a personal level. So it's a really good comment, and something I found certainly is, I mean, I'd been at Reach for over 6 years before COVID hit, and I felt it actually brought the organisation closer to some extent, because there were people after 6 years I'd never even met that I've now been on calls with and coordinated with, and especially because Reach is obviously, you know, it's a big big company. It's got offices all over the country. It actually kind of brought all those offices together, and there wasn't that sort of north-south divide, if you like. So there's definitely advantages and disadvantages, and thankfully, most of us will hopefully return to hybrid working, and it'll give us the best of both worlds. I thought just in case anyone else is watching and interested in some tips on different tools that might be useful. Is there any other tools anyone wants to mention that they've wished they'd discovered pre-COVID?
So Mira's a good one. I just saw that actually is now integrated here with Zoom. Is that right? Pretty sure that's happened quite recently. So it's a great collaboration tool, and we can use that for planning and for building designs as well. I use that all the time, so it's always good.
Cheers, Ben. So back onto the pre-submitted questions. So there's one here. What hobbies or interests from your teenage years made you realize you wanted to pursue your career? Anyone want to volunteer for that one?
I mean, for myself, definitely when I was younger, my dad taught me QBasic when I was about 12. But this is a language from like 1991, I think. So it's pretty basic. And definitely when I was at school, I was the nightmare breaking all the computers. And of course, the family computer. I remember trying to defrag it and wiping it out. But yeah, just always sort of messing around with computers, really. So I was always good with them, but I obviously didn't decide I'm going to do that career until 10 years afterwards. So I had a bit of a gap trying other things first.
And Jack, whilst I've got you, the next question is quite relevant as well. How hard did you find it to switch to a career in product and engineering? Because obviously you did something so different.
Yeah.
How did you find that transition?
Not the easiest, particularly because I knew I wanted to code, but I didn't know what the actual job was. I enjoyed writing code, but I didn't know about how the internet worked. I didn't know about HTTP. I didn't understand how web servers worked, which was my first job. Definitely some things that helped me, which I missed off my previous answer, was meetup.com. I think Victoria mentioned it, but yeah, I sort of messaged some developers on there and asked them for advice, and then they sort of gave me some pointers. But I personally found it quite difficult, but I think now, I think with like meetup.com and like there's lots of sort of support groups like Rails Girls London, stuff like that sort of help people transition into these careers. And coding boot camps tend to be quite popular now as well. So that would be some more advice to give them. But for me, I didn't find it so easy to transition. I remember walking into my first interview because I didn't know what Git was. I didn't know how to show people code. I didn't know how to write my CV. And I remember walking in with my laptop and just opened it and was like, this is some code I've written. And I was very lucky to get the opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. And I suppose any advice, we've lost Ben again, it seems. any advice from anyone else and somebody possibly looking to switch a career?
I think really, I think you can look to see what transferable skills you have. You may not have the job title at the moment, but it doesn't mean that you haven't done something that can't be used. So I think it's a case of trying to find the bits, where you think, well, I kind of have done that in a roundabout way, and maybe I could do that and I want to do that. So yeah, looking for transferable skills. And
for anyone that is looking, I mean, obviously it depends on what role you're looking to go into, but do you see it as anyone looking to switch? And this is another question which is sort of semi-related, that any advice for people switching careers, do you have to start at the entry level again, or do you think there's some sort of roles where, no, okay, Diana.
No, definitely no, because what I've seen so far is that there's a lot of experience, as in there's a lot in experience about attitude towards work rather than skills themselves. So as I think Ben mentioned earlier, all the technology we use is hardly a few years old. So technically, no matter which way you look at it, we should all be juniors still. Practically, the main skills we have, it's a continuous desire to learn, probably fairly good problem-solving skills, and I don't know, in engineering, you have to be good at Googling. So as long as you have those, you can transfer them from whichever domain you're actually working in. And then, just to make yourself ready for your first job and to impress someone, there are plenty of courses online on Udemy, or I don't know, there are other platforms as well. And just find the role, find something you think you like doing, do a course just so you know what's about. And it should be enough to convince someone to give you at least a mid-level job. There's definitely no reason to start from the entry levels.
Yeah, no, thanks. And that's a really good point. This is a relatively new industry in the grand scheme of things. And I think this is where passion is so important if you're passionate. But also a point you made earlier, Dana, which is relevant to this, is the technology is changing so quickly that even the experienced engineers are just learning every day, having to adopt new skills and essentially learn new languages constantly. So, and I've certainly witnessed, junior engineers who come in and very quickly excel and overtake a lot of some of the longer serving senior engineers. So any comments from anyone else on that, Jack or Victoria, in terms of certainly maybe in product, Victoria, where it's different? Do you think it is something that you don't necessarily need to start from the bottom and work your way up?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would sort of put it back to transferable skills again, and also that appetite, that curiosity to get involved. And I think, if you're already, let's say you've got a job in a company, there's a lot you can do with actually sort of shadowing others or just getting involved in other bits on the side to sort of make sure that it is sort of interesting for you and get a taster of what a day in the life might be like.
Thanks, Victoria. And I know there's a particular question for hiring managers here. What's your hiring and interviewing approach? So, Victoria, I know you've got interviews at the moment that you're conducting. Is there any sort of typical things you either look for, the kind of questions that you ask?
I don't want to repeat what I said earlier, but I think it really comes down to the person's attitude necessarily over the experience, sort of taking on somebody who's sort of willing to learn and, is interested, is curious. And I think, for me personally, that sort of having those kind of soft skills are really important, and that sort of ability to sort of communicate, collaborate, influence others. If you don't know how to use this tool over here, that's fine, that you can learn that and someone can teach you. But some of the other sort of softer skills are slightly harder. So that's my personal viewpoint.
And probably a related point, for those that are interviewed or got in the role, so not necessarily hiring managers, but when you are being interviewed, I mean, to some extent, the interviewee is interviewing the interviewer. It's the roles in this industry are on high demand. So, Jack, what is certainly in the past has made you think, that's a company I want to work for? What do you look for?
It's quite a tricky one, really. For me, definitely, obviously getting to know the managers in the interview, but for me, because I wanted to learn more about technical roles, often I want my seniors to be very knowledgeable in a area or any particular area. Definitely for me, I like to learn from my colleagues. So that's definitely a point that really I look for.
And Diana, I don't know if you got on that point, because certainly data and data engineering, it's a high demand. So what do you look for when you go for an interview in terms of you're investing a lot of your time and passion, as we've spoken about, into a company? What's the qualities you look for in an employer?
I'm looking for an employer to be tolerant, I think. To understand that, especially with data gives you the answer, but data is just like a muddy water. It can be very mischievous and misleading. So I'm looking for flexibility, for an attitude from the employer side that things are not what they seem. It doesn't matter how green everything looks like. There are always tricky situations. There are always problems. That's one thing. So I'm definitely looking for the acknowledgement that that's the reality. Then I'm looking to be culture fit. In a way, I guess that's gonna go back to who am I and what does culture fit means for me. I am, but it's not really. I'm looking for a mixture of people, for a diversity. I pretty much, not by diversity, I don't only mean gender balance. I want to work with all sorts of people. I'm obviously a Romanian in London, not necessarily by mistake, but because London is a multicultural place. So I somehow want that in a company I would work for. That's why I'm super excited about our diversity program. Um, I don't really know. It all goes back to it needs to feel right, and it has to be challenging.
You know, it's all really good points, and I echo your points around diversity. Some of the best teams I've worked on have been the most diverse, and I think you know, it just brings so much different perspectives and cultures, and we've made the wisest decisions with you know, such a rich variety of backgrounds. So definitely echo that. And Ben has come back just in time. So Ben, obviously you're a hiring manager. What do you look for when you interview, and are there any kind of sort of cheeky questions you chuck in to throw people off balance?
I can't give away all of my tricks, Darren, but yeah, hopefully I won't cut off. Yeah, when I'm looking at new hires, I am looking for those P's, you know, that passion and perseverance, people with the right attitude and aptitude as well. Again, I've said it already, the best project program managers, PMO leads that I've worked with just have a real drive for what they're doing and a desire to try to either deliver or to help others. And you know, engage in their own development and learning. Reach is a great place, and you know, my manager, who is Darren, is very enthusiastic about trying to help people explore their potential, and that kind of filters down to the rest of the senior leadership team. So yeah, as long as you're passionate about what you want to do, then Reach is a place that can facilitate that for you. And you can see it in the career histories of the people on the panel, my own and others in the organization. Some people have started from very junior roles and succeeded and been promoted to head teams and deliver some key products for us across key brands. Other people have worked vertically and found whole new kind of like areas of learning and professions within the organization. So yeah, I was just talking the other day to someone who I didn't realize was actually an editor that was actually now part of our operation delivery team. So yeah, it's a great family of people that work here. I think it's best to describe it as that. And if you're the right fit, and if Reach is the right fit for you, then there are opportunities boundless.
Thanks, Ben. And timing wise, this is it's perfect timing. So as mentioned at the start, we've got a lot of vacancies in product and engineering, data, product management. So if you are interested, you can visit jobs.reachplc.com and you can see which vacancies we have live. If you've got any specific questions you'd like to ask, you can email yourrecruitment at reachplc.com. And you can find out more there. So I'd just like to thank the panel for lending us some of your free time to give an insight into the teams at Reach and how you got here. So really appreciate that. And thanks to everyone that's either watching this live or pre-recorded. Thank you very much.